This Monday, January 16th, marks 4 months since the start of anti-government protests in Iran, sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in the custody of Iran's morality police. They've become the biggest challenge to the Islamic Republic since its founding in 1979. Violence has been the key strategy of the Iranian regime as they seek to stamp out the unrest. One rights group estimates that over 500 protesters have been killed by security forces, including dozens of children. At least 4 others have been executed, and over 100 others remain at risk. Still, though, the protests do continue. Joining me on set to reflect on the movement is Chowra Makaremi, a researcher at the French National Center for Scientific Research. Thank you so much for being here today. Could you perhaps start by telling us a little bit about your own history and relationship with Iran, and maybe what your first thoughts were when you saw these protests begin 4 months ago?
Yes, absolutely. So I was born in Iran, and I left the country in 1986 as a child. My father was a political refugee in France, and my mother, who was also a revolutionary in 1979, was jailed by that time in Iran. She remained jailed for more than 7 years in Adelaide, in Shiraz prison in Iran. And while she was due to be released in 1989, she was killed along with thousands of other political prisoners in 1988, at the end of the Iran-Iraq war. And I have been spending the last 10 years as an anthropologist working on state violence in the 1980s in Iran, because I think it's a foundational violence after the Iranian Revolution that is very important to understand how the state has built its grip over the Iranian society after the revolution, and how the Islamic Republic has set up like a social contract or a political contract with its society, saying that, okay, we open a little bit, the political life in the 1990s and on, but everything must remain within the red lines, and that's the word used in Iran, within the red lines of the Islamic Republic. And what I felt in last September was a shock, surprise, and hope, because what has been really torn apart is this kind of contract between state and society, because what is being crossed very vividly are those red lines. So something has changed profoundly, and I think that the demonstration that we see are one manifestation of this very profound change, which is a will of challenging the regime and wanting its end. So it's not anti-government protest, it's really anti-regime protest and a revolutionary movement, and this is the first time since '79.
And you yourself were so far away when your mom was executed by the regime. What has it been like for you to watch executions of these protesters now being carried out by the government?
So I had many, of course, mixed thoughts and mixed emotions. But just to quote a few, first, we saw that the state was applying a recipe that it knew well, because that's how exactly silence and a kind of an amnesia about, violence was created in the 1980s through these revolutionary courts. And we must say that President Raisi right now was a revolutionary judge, and he sent personally to death the thousands of prisoners in 1988 and many more before that. So the state does what he knows to do to kind of manage the contestation, the protest, and that is creating atomization, individuation, and destructuring solidarity and the social tissue through those executions that are spectacles of terror, because 4 persons have been killed against the 500 people who were killed in the street, but those 4 killed, hanged, sometimes in public, have an impact. But the interesting thing is that this impact this time is not the same, and the Iranian society is resisting atomization, destructuration, by having a politics of affect, because the Iranians, what they say, the public opinion or on social networks, and very loudly with a lot of anger, what they say is that those who are killed are our brothers, and they solidarize. They don't, they don't accept to play that game of terror that is getting back into the private sphere, being silenced. What happened in 2009, for instance, and that put an end into the 2009 Green Movement was those public executions as well. And this time, the society is refusing that and is getting, the movement is being filled by anger. So we don't have fear, we have less fear and more anger this time. And this is all also a very new dimension.
And is that what you'd say has changed? That's the reason that social contract, as you called it, has sort of been broken, and that this time around is different? It's the...
Absolutely. It's because all those agreements being like unsaid, untold agreements, also, the public secret. Everybody knew about state massacres in the 1980s, but nobody ever talked about them. And their memory was not transmitted into the new generation, or so we thought. But, let's look at those who have become the voice of and kind of the face of this movement. The singer Shervin Hajipour with his song Baraye that we all know, the rap singer Toumaj Salehi, who's now more than 2 months in prison and severely tortured. Those two singers, their fathers have been political prisoners in the 1980s, and Toumaj's uncle have been executed. So we can see that actually a memory of resistance has been transmitted to the new generation, and this is also what is fueling a kind of, divorce between state and society. And we cannot go back into what was before September 2022.
And given that you feel like Iran can't go back, what do you imagine is going to be next for this movement?
So, there's a reconfiguration because street protests are now taking other shapes, and there is a different rhythm of the protest now. It's not every day. So for almost 4 months, it was every day. There was not one day without a protest. But now it's more like there's a call for 3 days, 2-3 days of protests and strikes, and this can also help shape and demonstrate kind of a cohesion and organization at the national level. So it's very important because it's through those, practices of nationwide days of protest that the organization is taking shape. But there is also the fact that the Iranian society is transnational. So there is what the diasporas are doing, and there are multiple outside the country. And for instance, today there is this demonstration in front of the European Parliament to kind of call for putting the Guardians of the Revolution Corp on the terrorist list from the European Parliament. And we know that the UK also is reacting strongly to the execution of one of its dual citizens. So there is those pressures coming from every front that are kind of fueling the power relation. And in this context, we have yet to see what other answer than, mere force and mere repression the regime has to give. And for now, it didn't show any, creativity or any other exit way than something that is not working, which is, the killing of people.
Chowra, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us today. That's Chowra Makaremi, a researcher at the French National Center for Scientific Research.